You're only going to get to see that for a few more days because it is the final countdown of the Ontario election campaign with less than a week until voters head to the polls on June 2nd. Today, all the leaders were out on the campaign trail.
If you want more excuses, if you want more delays and more empty talk, well, you've got a lot of options in this election.
He is simply not qualified to do the job of being premier of this province, and he does not have the capacity to grow into the job. He's made that evident over the past 4 years.
We can bring people hope back again. We can send Doug Ford packing.
We know that we have to work hard to earn people's trust and earn their vote on election day.
Polling from the Angus Reid Institute suggests Ford's Progressive Conservatives still hold a comfortable lead. President Shachi Kurl is here to discuss those findings. She is in Vancouver. Hey, Shachi. Rob Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Sabrina Nanji is author of the Queen's Park Observer newsletter. Hello, everybody. Shachi, we're going to start with you and that new voter intention data. Can you walk us through it?
Sure. So everybody wants to start with vote. Nobody wants to talk about the issues and the undercurrents. So fine, we go with vote.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
So we are seeing right now a race that continues to be the PCPO's to lose and Doug Ford's to lose in the next couple of days. There has not been a lot of movement over the course of this campaign. And if anything, momentum has not been on the side of any of the leaders. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of vote intention, you're seeing for the Ontario Conservatives, 38%, and then a bit of a battle between the Liberals in Ontario and the NDP at 24 and 26%, or 26 and 24%, respectively, with the Greens sitting at 7%. Now, you know, I acknowledge, and I said yesterday on this show that this campaign really has been about the battle of the bleh, because people are not warming up to the main contenders in this campaign. But it doesn't mean it hasn't been about issues. And it has actually been about one very specific issue, and that is jitters and anxiety around cost of living and inflation. 58%, Catherine, say that that is one of the top three issues for them. And going beyond that, the number who say that housing affordability is a top issue, that has doubled to 40% in the last 2 years. But it's not as though any of the leaders have much of an edge in the eyes of voters on this issue. Ford seen as best on housing affordability at only 30%. That's less than a third of the electorate who think that he can get the job done on that front. And then you've got a lovely tie between Andrea Horwath and not sure at 26%, and then Stephen Del Duca at 14% in terms of their ability to really fix affordability for Ontarians.
Wow, that's less than compelling. Sabrina, Premier Ford has had a significant lead throughout this campaign. What should the opposition parties be trying to do if they have any hope of making up that gap over the course of the next few days?
Yeah, there's really not a lot of time left to change course from what most public opinion polls have been basically telling us since day one of this campaign. And so I think the more interesting race is going to be the one for second place, like who's going to form official opposition. To knock Doug Ford maybe off his confidence pedestal right now, it will take a lot of pitches for strategic voting. I think we've been hearing that from the parties, the Liberal and the NDP, from the beginning, and that's typically the kind of big guns you bring out closer to election day. So expect that to ramp up quite a bit. Of course, what's going to matter is the get out the vote machines as well. And so if the Conservatives are getting a little too cocky, a little too comfortable, they could certainly, that could certainly hurt them as well. But I think that, more talk about long-term care, the Ford government's handling of the pandemic. It's been really difficult for the opposition parties to capitalize on some of those missteps. Now we're hearing them talk, as Shachi said, about affordability. And, I think generally speaking, a lot of the electorate tend to trust Conservatives more on those issues, and there's not as much talk about the pandemic and healthcare and those sorts of things. I think a lot of us have a bit of COVID fatigue as well. So there's a lot at play here. But if they want to kind of knock Doug Ford down a few pegs, maybe hold him to a minority, it'll be up to the opposition to start putting those messages out there and really hammering him hard on his handling of the pandemic. We've seen him get tripped up on that, on the mistakes that he's made over the last 2 years. But we kind of had the opposition talking more about affordability, about highways or, not highways, which they're against, building some of those. So I think, it's going to come down to certain issues for sure.
Okay, well, on that idea of a race for second, Rob, I want to bring you in because earlier this week you got your hands on a Liberal memo laying out the strategy to hold the PCs to a minority. And then yesterday you reported on an NDP memo insisting that they can stop Ford. What does all of that tell us, other than that people like leaking you memos? What does that tell us about the fight for second place?
We like memos, but we also take everything that is leaked like that, Catherine, with a grain of salt, because obviously sometimes memos are written in order to be leaked. Earlier in the campaign, we got leaked internal Tory polling, which I actually think is the Conservative polling, because they spend so much on it and they do a lot of live caller polls, probably is quite effective, quite detailed.
Do the memos ever say like "Dear Rob" at the top, tip you off or something?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, and unfortunately, we don't tend to get the ones that they don't want us to see.
Indeed.
Which are the ones that show the infighting that every campaign is plagued by, and the problems that they have, the candidates that they want to fire, the MPPs they hope that aren't reelected, all that fun stuff. We don't get those, unfortunately. But I'm all ears, and my email address is on the Star's website. So
but the fight for second, what do you think all of this tells us? They're positioning, and you know that, and you report it that way. But can we make any meaningful conclusions about how well that fight's going?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the party's own polling shows what the publicly available polling has shown. Doug Ford's Conservatives are leading. They are probably going to win a majority, but are they on the knife's edge of a majority in the 124-seat legislature is 62, 63 seats. 63, I guess, and you have to have a speaker. But so if they slip up, I mean, remember, 60% of Ontarians aren't going to vote for Doug Ford, probably. So there's a lot of jockeying among the progressive parties, the Greens, and especially among the New Democrats and the Liberals. And that's going to be interesting to watch, as Sabrina was saying. Where do those leaders go in the days ahead? Do the Liberals abandon certain seats that they know they can't win? And do the New Democrats abandon certain seats they know they can't win in order to fortify places that they believe they can win? So that's going to be what I'm going to be watching. And Doug Ford is going to be fighting a sort of two-front war, because in some places he's up against the New Democrats, in some places, especially here in Toronto, he's up against, and then the 905, he's up against the Liberals.
Shachi, I'm going to throw you, this is maybe like a little bit of a curveball here, and you just let me know if this is something you're willing to take on. But this question of like the last 6 days and big momentum shifts, how often does that happen in a campaign? Or is this like, we're just really sort of playing around the margins more likely? Any thoughts?
It can. Usually there's a sign of it coming. Usually you see it in terms, and so much, it's actually an excellent question. So we saw it actually happen in the federal election in 2015, where the Liberals were creeping along, ticking up, beetling up under Justin Trudeau. And then right at the end, that momentum surge, everyone wanted to get on that bandwagon. They felt good about who they were voting for. And that actually brings up two really important things. First of all, in an election where no one's really warmed up to leadership, you're going to have situations where it comes down to party faithful to decide, am I going to go cast my ballot? I'm not very enthusiastic about it, but I guess I'll go do this because this is what I do. I support my party. I'll show up for my party. So turnout is going to be a big factor here. And when you have people more likely or equally likely to vote against a party to block them from forming government, as we're seeing, as they are to really feel good about a leader, how does that affect and shift dynamics? The other thing is, in times of uncertainty, are we likely to see people really sort of doing that bit of a gut check? Rob talked about, or it might have been Sabrina, about people to the right of center being a little more inclined to stick A with the status quo or B with the Conservatives. Also, vote propensity. Older voters, older men tend to vote more, also tend to vote more Conservative. So let's see how all of that plays out in these last days.
Okay, Shachi called it the campaign of the bleh, I think it was. Did I make that sound properly?
The Battle of the Bleh.
There we go. I like the alliteration. But this is like, but what an anti-bleh panel we've just had. Thank you all so much for your time.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.